Sacred Path Holistic Therapy is a nonprofit organization. We have about 30 therapists now. We are all over California and also licensed in Nevada as well. And we will get into it, but I also do coaching outside of those lines. But Sacred Path therapists are licensed in California and Nevada to see clients. And how it grew was also very organically, very naturally, very soul led. I had an incredible opportunity and mentor when I was learning to be a therapist. I also say like when I was growing up, he guided me. He changed my life. He really offered me an invitation to do my own inner work, and that involved healing trauma and facing things that I never intended to and never really even knew were that big of a deal or were running the show. And so when that veil came down and I started really doing that work and I recognized how life-changing that work was, and I had that support and mentorship, brilliant guidance, he actually at one point made me promise. He's like, you have to promise to supervise one day. And I said, okay, all right, and anything for you. And so as therapists know, you have to be licensed for 2 years before you can start working as clinical supervisor. So as soon as that 2 years came, I had my first associate come to me and say, hey, would you supervise me? And I said, sure. So I had one therapist that I supervised, and then I had three within a month or two. I was about 8 or 10 by 2020 consistently. And then certainly the pandemic, as it wound up being, painful in many ways for us, it also wound up opening doors for us. And I love to really lean into meaning. And so for me, it was meaningful in that way, in that people could come to me now from all over California and even Nevada now and say, will you supervise me? And so because we were able to do telehealth, right, that changed and it became more normal and also acceptable with regulatory practices like BBS. So once I started supervising that way, I had to hire more supervisors and we grew because I feel very blessed to say, we have a lot of people that want to work with us at Sacred Path. And so it grew very organically. It grew very naturally. It just was anytime that people felt in alignment with me and I wanted to work with them, I just grew the practice. And it also, I feel like I always say, like, it's also like its own being. I really honor Sacred Path as like its own entity. It has its own heart and soul, and it has its own soul mission here. I'm just here to guide it. I am like mother of Sacred Path. So
Really interesting and unique about you specifically. Like this is like, we've done over 20 episodes of conversations with therapists. And I think this is the first time that I think I've heard like from the therapist saying, I did healing. I needed to go through that journey for me. And I think that just shows like your approach and like how holistic that really is. And I guess I'm wondering like, what is your personal approach to healing and transformation? How does that come into therapy for you? It's just something I noticed like right off the bat just now as well. It's like, wow, yeah, I could pinpoint that.
yeah. Happy to answer that question. And oh my gosh, how do you answer that question? What heals, right? I had never been taught, CBT. Like I didn't really know how to look at a client and say like, well, tell me your thoughts, feelings, and actions, and let's change your behaviors. Or let's weigh the evidence as to like how that's not true, what you're thinking, and then we'll just not think that again. I was never taught that way. So I was very soul led in my training and my journey. And because of that, I feel like it really opened me up to work intuitively. And then, of course, over time, the clinical pieces came in, right? Like there is usefulness in things like CBT, DBT. Certainly I resonate with like humanistic and existential and psychodynamic. So I'm really eclectic in that way. And then what I would say as far as like, yeah, what does it take to heal or what is healing? I feel like that's such a loaded question. I feel like there's so many ways to get there, and it really depends on the individual person as to how you're going to get there. Certainly, there's people that are going to benefit from things like EMDR or energy work or brain spotting, and then EFT I like too. But while those things are useful and helpful, I think of them as tools, and I think of healing on a soul level as reintegration of split off parts. So what that means to me is if you have experienced a traumatic experience, you kind of lie on the spectrum somewhere. A lot of people who haven't walked that path yet, like gone into the healing work of that, experience it in the system of, in a way of like, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Like maybe it wasn't, or like, I don't know, maybe this thing is kind of bugging me, but like maybe it's not. It's not active, right? It's like doormat, but you have maybe a little bit of an awareness of it. And then some people are very aware of it and are stuck in the victim stage of healing, which is also a very commendable stage. Like it's a stage that we honor. I never speak about that in a negative way. I think it's so important for us to understand that we have been victims of certain circumstances, right? And so in that space, we do need to feel our pain. We do need to feel our suffering and have compassion for ourselves and move through that. And then a lot of therapy, I feel like, gets you to a surviving place. And the surviving place is like, okay, now I have the tools and resources to turn toward my pain as opposed to away from it. I know when I'm triggered, I have some tools to work with that to bring nervous system regulation back into the body when I'm activated. I know, what my boundaries are, and I know how to be in the world. And I feel really proud about that. And maybe I'm interested in psychology now or helping another. And for me, when you come into the thriving phase, and I feel like it is a unique space, I want to say, bringing it back to depth psychology, intuition, soul-led therapy. I really feel like then we come into my personal opinion and belief, and I don't push this on anybody, but I feel like people really start to open up themselves intuitively and spiritually. They start to have deeper connection to life, self, universe, whatever it is for you when they've done that healing work. So I really feel like when we come into that thriving place, we've integrated all of our parts, maybe not all of them, we're always still healing, right? But we've reintegrated split off parts of self. And just to speak to that briefly, what I mean by that simply is if you are aware of your pain and whether you're conscious of what it is or not, think about what energy you're most easily able to access, meaning like, are you able to access anger or are you able to access grief? And whichever one you're not able to access, or I could say it this way, whichever one you are able to access, whichever one you're going to, and it's causing an issue in your life, perhaps it's anxiety, depression, anger issues, etc. We need to reintegrate the other parts, the parts that are completely unconscious. They've been put over there. And so that's just one example. There's all kinds of parts that we split off from needs, right? We tell ourselves like, I don't have needs. I'm okay. I can stay in this situation and just keep putting that over there, right? So there's a lot of things, ways that we compartmentalize, not even just consciously and cognitively. Like trauma actually allows us, one of the ways that we stay safe in trauma is that we take parts of that trauma, not knowingly, and we put it away, right? We put it over here so that we are safe and well. And when it comes back to heal, we have to go and we have to reintegrate those parts. So I think of healing as wholeness, as reintegration of all parts.
I know that you do coaching, and I know that specifically you specialize in supporting parents who have neurodivergent children. I know a little bit just from working with you, a little bit about your background, but I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about why that is, how you got to that sort of field.
Yeah, the why I feel like is such a soulful question. I have three children, one of which is on the autism spectrum. You wouldn't know. She's very, very high functioning, very, very smart, incredibly creative, brilliant, earth-saving child. And when I say that, like she will come after you if you do not recycle. But you wouldn't know except for behavioral challenges, inability or challenges with regulation. I had a hard time, an impossible time, I should say, soothing her when she was a baby. So she has been my teacher and my guide in so many ways. And I recently actually wrote a book. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but I wrote a book, which is right now entitled The Art of Chaos, in which my motherhood journey and it's not just about that, but my motherhood journey has not been easy, especially having a first child on the spectrum and not knowing it at first. And so my initiation into motherhood was extraordinarily challenging. You know, I had a baby that I couldn't soothe. I had a toddler that I could never get it right, right? So she was really initiating me into this world of like, I mean, all of the insecurities, all of the like, I'm not good enough, all of the core wounds, all of the like, I'm failing at life were like coming alive in me through this journey as mother. And while that's happening, I'm still trying to get, you know, a child into a car seat who's arching her back and I can't get her in, or trying to get a child to transition through the steps of mourning, right? When she has transition struggles and I can't get her from bed to brushing teeth to, you know, washing face and hair to eating breakfast to getting out of the door. It's just, it was like, it sounds simple for those who are not parents of neurodivergent children, and maybe even most parents would understand like the challenges in that. But it's extreme when your child is on the spectrum. It's extreme, and whether they're, you know, whether you want to say on the spectrum ASD, or you want to say they only have ADHD or AUDHD or sensory processing issues or OCD or whatever you want to label it, when they're wired a little bit differently, it's really challenging. And I'll have to mind like how many stories I could tell you, but I mean, I remember my daughter from a very young age coming to me with like, it was like, Mama, can you, you know, put this dress on this teddy bear? And the teddy bear was like 10 sizes way too big. Like that dress is never going on that bear. Or let's read this book. And then when we get to the last page, I want this page to turn. But that's not a page that turns, right? It's a board book, it's done, whatever it is. It sounds so simple, but for parents who know what I'm talking about, it's extreme because it leads to 45, 60, maybe longer meltdowns, right? Like child is now screaming, clenching fits, bright red. I can't soothe her. All of the things in the parenting books are not working, right? Everything I know as a therapist is not working. Oh, just validate her and mirror her and hold space for her feelings. Well, she can't hear me because
Yeah.
she's screaming and she's like dissociating and spinning around in circles. And I'm freaking out too, right? Like I've never been called to do my work like this before. So I had an extraordinarily challenging journey as a new mother. And I often tell people, I say, hey, if you would have seen me with my other two kids, if they would have come first, I would have thought I was a phenomenal mother, right? Because we have these children and then we think that they are a representation of parenting. And that's certainly, that was my judgment, right? We also learn things as we grow. And when we become parents, I think we also, I know for myself, look back at times where I'm like, wow, I was really judgmental, right? Because I looked at situations sometimes and I said, oh, that's definitely the mother's fault, right? And it's not, right? Sometimes it is, but rarely is it. So, so I was dealing with just incredible chaos, dysregulation, challenge, heartbreak. My father became very ill and I was caring for him. I had my own mother wound stuff coming up in this journey with my child. I had marriage problems. I had, you know, I was just in this pot of chaos. And I started to learn as I began to do my own nervous system regulation work again, right? Like it was kind of like I had to go back to the beginning. And I feel I teach parents that now too. It's like I learned firsthand that even though I had done all of this work as an individual, I had done all of this work. I knew who I was confident in the world. I was a psychologist. I had all this background and degrees and whatever, right? And then I became a mother, and it was like I went back to the same nervous system state I was at when I was a child. Like I had to learn everything all over again, and everything that I struggled with along the way that I had already healed and changed and evolved, I now had to do it again from another layer. So, anyways, it became this journey where I really started to learn what my daughter was teaching me, what she was mirroring to me on a soul level, what she was growing and evolving in me as well. And then, of course, I was learning how to support her. I learned all kinds of things about neurofeedback, neurosensory integration, chiropractic work that you could do with children on the spectrum. functional medicine and craniosacral therapy and equine therapy, art therapy. Like we just did it all. I actually spent a couple years with my child instead of having her in like a typical school program. I just worked to help her regulate and learn how her system works, or I was learning and teaching her the little bits that I could. So I went through this very incredibly intense, long, profound, hard journey. And eventually, as we often do, our soul leads us to where it is that it's going. And when I came out the other side of that, not to say that I am completely on the other side of that, because I'm not. And I'm so honest about that. I'm like, I am in the mess too. Okay. But I am at least further or far enough along to be able to say, I can now support parents that are dealing with this. And so, yeah, it started working. I started with working with mothers, and then I've noticed that I've really attracted families too. And just like I've been sharing here, I really trust that attraction, that intuition. And so right now I'm really leaning into like whatever's coming to me and I'm showing up for those people. And it really does seem to be families right now. But so I would say my coaching is mother based in the sense that like I'm a mother, I'm going to be able to really meet you and see you where you're at. But I've also had a lot of fathers, I've also had a lot of families come in too. And so that's been really beautiful too, to see people that are ready to work the whole system, like get everybody on board and work towards awakened family. And conscious work is not easy. So I really honor and acknowledge the people that are doing that work.
Yeah, I think to be able to draw from personal experience and then kind of reflect that, uh, especially as you said, being far enough along to know more tools, not necessarily to say, I have it perfect and I have it right, but to be more confident in what you can, give to others, I think is really important, especially because I know that a lot of parents, as you said, that it's confusing. All the things that you've learned about being a parent, or the things you've grown up with, and we're not really taught necessarily like, okay, and this is also what happens if your child is neurodivergent. I think maybe today it's talked about a little bit more, but it's not in the sense of like you're growing up and you have all the tools to kind of know what to do. Um,
Right.
and I'm interested to know how you sort of reframe sort of parenting roles, or how people respond to how they're going to be parents when they're feeling, confused, frustrated. There's a lot of emotions going on. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about like the method that you use.
Yeah. So right now, I would say it's in its becoming. Because, like I said, I really stood in this place of like, okay, the method I use is for mothers, and then it's had to change and evolve. So it's really in this becoming place. I'm currently actually working on developing a part of the program to be like in real time with people, helping them through situations in real time. Because when you are in those moments and you have a child who's having a really large meltdown and you're dealing with all of the things that are coming up in you too, and who knows what they are. And if I wanted to speak to method, what I would say the most important part of what it is that I'm offering, teaching, and holding with people is helping them heal whatever it is that's coming up in them, that's being invited, we could say, through what their child is showing them. So, when going back to that example, say you're at the mall and your child is on the floor throwing this massive meltdown, there's going to be parents that are at a place in their journey where they can regulate. So they have nervous system tools, ability to regulate, bring their own nervous system out of fight or flight, freeze or fawn, sit down with the child on the floor if they need to, and let them have, their meltdown and then move on. And then there are going to be parents that are going to be upset with that child, right? Like trying to control them, responding to them how their parents responded to them when their parents didn't know any better either, right? So they're going to say things like, get up, it's time to go, like, oh my gosh, right? And then there are going to be parents who are going to feel incredibly embarrassed and be worried about what everybody's thinking, and the narratives are going to come in, and either way, it's really like, let's start paying attention to what's happening inside of you when your child is having these difficult moments versus just like I think so much work right now, like you said, it's new for people to really be paying attention to this component, but people really are. There are a lot of people paying attention to neurodivergence now. What I think is really focused on right now is like, well, what do you do for the child? Like, how do you help the child? And while that's so important, I'm really taking the approach of like giving you tools for that as well, but really coming back to the parent. What's happening for you right now? What's coming up in you right now? And an example I gave recently was I think that a lot of people, at least those that are stepping into conscious parenting, hear messages like, okay, so if your child's having a big emotional outburst and it's hard for you, it might be hard for you because you weren't allowed to feel your feelings when you were little, right? And that's a beautiful message and it's potentially true and that might be it, but we're going even deeper than that. And I did this, I shared this my own story about this in this book that I wrote with the intention of helping others see how it goes deeper, how the threads go deeper. And so it might not necessarily just be like, oh, I'm dysregulated right now because my child is showing feelings that I wasn't allowed to feel. It might be I'm dysregulated right now because I have a trauma history and my child is triggering that, right? Like they're feeling unsafe to me. I can share, briefly and very vulnerably that one of the things that came up in my own journey, and there were several, um, was when my daughter would go, because when she would go into meltdown, she would go from like deep connection and like joy. Like we were usually always in some like incredible
Mm.
joy. And she always had to cross over that boundary just naturally. It's like, it's kind of, if I wanted to label it, it's like a subtype of autism. And I can speak to PDA. I won't speak to it here, but those that know what that is or want to go look it up. But she always had to cross into this like other threshold of like, how far can I push this boundary? Not consciously, but it just was part of her journey. And so whenever we were in like deep joy and connection, she would cross the threshold into like, you know, testing, well, can I paint on the carpet? Right. Or, and it was always something impossible. It wasn't like I was a strict mom. It was just like, well, no, not today. You can't actually dump, blue paint all over the carpet. Like I have to draw the line there. And it would turn into these massive meltdowns. And the part that I'm sharing is something that I learned through my own journey was like, oh, it's really scary for me to go from being in deep connection with somebody to not, to like instant like shift that's gone. And I have a trauma history of that. I have a history of that exact pattern. So there were other things that came up and I really worked through this writing to show that our own stories, our own trauma histories, the beautiful things too, but the difficult things they're coded in our bodies, they're coded in our nervous systems. And so our children are bringing those things alive. And I hold the perspective that there's meaningfulness in that and that we're being invited to heal. Um, and so, yeah. So if I had to speak to method, I'm not a very in the box structured person. So that would just be my answer. I would just say like those are the things that I'm really looking at and working to bring people. And then at the same time, while we're doing that insight work, I'm also giving people real tools, real time nervous system regulation strategies because that part is so important too.
Being able to share that vulnerability is really important. And I can see that, like, not only is it like that in the coaching, but what you were talking about with Sacred Path as well is kind of like that is sort of the approach. And I think it's a specific approach. And I think for those, again, as we were saying, who people who are seeking that, it's there, which is fantastic. I know we touched a little bit just now on the book, and I feel like that's something that personally I would love to read. I think that just sounds incredible, and it's so great that you get to share your story in that way. And I'm sure that it will also help a lot of parents who I'm sure are feeling very similar things to the things you felt and still feel. And as we start to sort of wrap up, I guess I have two sort of final questions. One is leading more into the coaching, like what if now that, there's parents watching this who kind of maybe need a little bit of support or just some sort of advice what's the advice that you would sort of give? Let's say they're struggling, they have one or two or whatever the situation is, neurodivergent children, and they're feeling lost. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely advise for people to reach out for support, and if it's something that you're able to afford or even create space to invest in and take very seriously, like the investment of time and energy as well, then I think that coaching is a brilliant fit. It takes, the programs, especially that I'm doing, are very high touch, right? So like I'm right there with you. But I know that there's going to be certain people that are able to do that and even have the time and energy to do that. And then there's people that aren't. And so if that's not something that is available or accessible to you at this point, reach out, whether it's to us or if you're in another state, besides California or Nevada, there are resources like us, meaning Sacred Path being a nonprofit is pre-licensed therapists that are able to offer more flexible rates, and have more flexibility typically on scheduling and have openings. I know that's something that people are really struggling with today, is finding a therapist. So look around, into your community for those supports too. And then certainly getting information online. I mean, I think one of the unfortunate things right now, I do want to say there's a lot of awareness coming in about neurotypes, neurodivergence, et cetera. One of the unfortunate things, and this will change, it's just the time that we're in, I would say, is that, well, I have this statement to make. When I started going through this with my daughter, like once I started really recognizing, and it took time for me to wake up to even what it was, I realized that even with my background, even with my education, everything that I had been taught about psychology was for the neurotypical brain. And that was wild to me because it was like, not only do I have to go on this new journey of like healing and uncovering and dealing with things in myself that I didn't know were still there, but now I need to also go learn neuroscience in a different way, right? Like study the brain, like understand what's happening in the nervous system in a way that I did not know before. So when I say it's unfortunate, it's just that like, unfortunately, there is a gap in our system right now where it's like, this isn't even taught in schools. So educating yourself, getting support, and then I think really normalizing it, right? So whether that's like having community support out there or working with somebody who gets it, make sure there's somebody in your life that's saying like, yes, I see you and I get it and I'm here. I feel like that is so important too. And I will say, as a mother on this journey, one of the most challenging things for me was when I was trying to reach that support. Granted, I didn't know exactly where to reach it at the time. But most other mothers, to no fault of their own, many of them were having neurotypical experiences, and those who were not did not want to admit it, would just reflect back to me like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's what I'm going through too. And it's like, it's not though. It's extreme. And that's why I said the people that are listening to me tell these stories today, it's like, if you do have a child that's, wired a little bit differently, or is feeling, challenged in different ways, or maybe isn't clearing the toxins in the world like other children are, you're going to know, at least even by today, of what I'm sharing with you, that it is more extreme. It is different, and you do need support.
Yeah, and it sounds like also just with the work that you're doing, you're becoming part of bridging that gap, which is really, really important. And I think that that's just, it's something that, society takes time before it changes. So it needs the people who are willing to kind of make those changes in order for it to become more commonplace. I am really excited about the book. I can't wait to read it. And I honestly think that we should have you back on after the book comes out and we can talk about it in a little bit more depth. And just thank you for being here with us today. It's really great to hear about what you do, kind of go into a little bit more in depth, and hopefully, it will help people who are here listening.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Shifra. I appreciate being invited today, and yeah, thank you.